welcome back to These Go to 11. Once again, I'm Nathan Bell. Joining me as always, Nathan Bartleball. Nathan, what's going on, man?
Hey, not too much. I'm here.
You're here.
I mean, there's always a lot going on. But
it's already exciting, guys.
Yes.
Nothing's
Heard
going on.
that other voice.
We have a special
Just
crossover
the same
episode with Zach Bartles. Zach, what is going on, man?
Hey, not much. I'm just kidding. No, lots of stuff going on.
Lots of stuff
just got
going
back.
on.
We were just talking about insurrections and things.
I still want to freak people out.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot going on. Nothing for general discussion.
Nothing to see here. It's just a podcast. About
I don't live right near Washington, D.C. like you guys, and I don't have immediate family who were working that day at the Capitol, but I was flying. And that morning, the first thing I saw when I opened my phone was that someone was going to fly a plane into the Capitol. Because I was flying back I was visiting Ted Cluck in Tennessee, and I was flying out of Memphis, and I was like, there's enough fuel in a flight from Memphis to Chicago, probably to get you down to D.C. So it was a little nerve-wracking. But I'm good. I'm rested. I had a great couple weeks off. First time with any time off since COVID began. Oh, wow. So I feel great. Yeah.
Nice. That's awesome, man. Well, Zach, I'm going to turn this over to you because I know that you and Nathan are going to have some words for me here. But this was actually your idea for a podcast, and I admittedly screwed that up a little bit. And so I'm going to turn it over to you and give you an opportunity to go ahead and berate me for not doing my job in due diligence in preparing for this thing. So take it away, Zach.
Okay, so I don't know. It's a little late. It's a late Festivus airing of grievances, really. But Nathan was supposed to. Both Nathans were supposed to get caught up with Cobra Kai. Netflix series Cobra Kai season 3 is out now. Watch all the episodes in sequence, Nathan. Which is how normal people watch shows.
Chronological sequence, I guess.
Without skipping chunks of seasons.
Right.
Excuse me, I'm dying over here. I have all the COVIDs, 1 through 19. No, I am smoking a cigar over here like Sensei Kreese. That's how I've been dealing with.
Yeah, you were
all
even
of 2020.
holding it at one point. Yeah. Right.
But then they were supposed to listen to at least a few episodes of my podcast, Give Sin a Body Bag, which we
weren't made aware of until last night, I believe.
Well, I thought it made sense that you would know this. It was an episode. It was going to be an episode of that podcast.
All the time you've worked with us, and Greg, you've not learned that you have to explicitly tell us everything. And even then, there's a 35% chance we're going to show.
There's like a 25-minute episode you got to listen to. But anyway, Nathan Bartleball got caught up all the way through the end of the series, but didn't listen to even one episode of my podcast. Nathan Bell didn't either. He played some Star Wars video games. He
took 3 or 4 naps.
He did some other stuff that we're not going to talk about that he talked about off air. But he didn't.
Coffee and contemplation, fellas.
Thumb up his butt, this guy, and metaphorically speaking.
Particularly since you did give us a hypothetical week. Said, should we take the week? No, I got it on Monday.
Should we? I mean, it's not too late to reschedule this thing for next Monday. And I was going to also bring Josh Loftus in from the Reformatory. By the way, Josh Loftus, who he and I have been for a while. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but we're planning a new podcast someday that's like either monthly or bi-monthly or just whenever we feel like it. With
like
Stephen
us.
Right.
Yeah, right. This one used to be regimented. When I was the co-host, this was weeks, every week, man. There was no fooling around. Nathan would get on me. But Josh and I we've also got Stephen Eltrogi semi locked in to be on most of the time, and we're going to call it Behold Our Pod.
Nice.
And it's gonna be a different podcast every time. Like a different theme and a different format, and then we're going to cancel it at the end, like how Stephen Eltrogi, every time he gets a good podcast going, He just cancels it.
It's fitting. It's fitting for Trogs there.
Anyway, so Loftus bailed on me. And he was the only guy who actually has listened to all of my pod episodes and seen all of Cobra Kai. So I said, why don't we, since this isn't this bar to be my podcast, why don't we make it your podcast? And make it an episode of these go to 11.
So how many episodes of your podcast are there?
So this will be number 7. And there may be one more. It's a mini series. It's not, I didn't have.
If you legitimately want to hold off, I will definitely. I don't know if it's going to help Nathan Bell out any, but I will listen.
Here's the deal. If I have, I can honestly say a week, and I will be able to get through all that stuff because we have next Monday off for Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So I know that gives me an extra day. If anything pops
Star
up,
Wars.
Yeah, well, right. As I do, as one does.
You know what? Forget it. Let's just push ahead. We're on the phone now. And what Nathan Bartlebaugh tried to say was, I thought it would be more interesting if, knowing just the basic premise of it, I came into it completely blind, deaf, and dumb.
Well, who knows?
So I want to talk a little bit about season 3 with Nathan Bartlebaugh. Well, Nathan Bell just sits there sheepishly. We're going to spoil it, the whole the season, and the end of season 2, in which Miguel gets kicked off of a second-story floor in his high school.
In the middle of, what do they call it? An all-out karate frenzy?
It is a karate gang fight.
Yes. And then the news at the beginning of season 3, there's someone on the news saying an all-out karate, like, what was it? It was frenzy or some kind of word like that. An all-out, whatever it was, you're like, oh, how often does this happen that there are karate fights in 2020?
Well, and part of that was like that whole show, it walks the line, kind of like my podcast that you haven't heard, of is this serious or is this tongue-in-cheek? And even like that big climactic fight from season 1 in the finale, it seemed really serious. Like, what am I watching, the OC all of a sudden now? Like, over serious and over dramatic. Now guys in the hospital hooked up the machines. But then, the very next thing is the premiere of the next season, and they're like making warring karate gangs in the high school.
There's a battle, right? And then the girl has like almost like a phobia of stairs,
right? Yeah, she can't.
Want to get thrown over the rungs.
It's not even the stairs. It's like the railing.
Yes,
I'm like, dude, walk up it without using the railing, dummy. LaRusso's, am I right?
Yeah, well, and I'm sure you probably talked about this on your podcast, which I'll find out.
Are you sure, though?
Well, we'll see how this goes. I want to see what exactly I scuttled. So, but have you, I assume that you've enjoyed all of them so far. What did you think about this third one compared to the other 2?
Well, I think it wasn't the best, but it was the best we could hope for in a third season. The nature of the Cobra Kai show is that season 1 was always going to be the best because it introduced the concept. It gave us this flipped backwards reality of now it's this string bean kid who's being bullied. What he needs is Cobra Kai, right? What he needs is a kind of karate that your blankety blank generation desperately needs. Strike first, strike hard, stop needing a safe space, take your asthma and your gluten allergies and leave them at the door. And so like to have it backwards and to embrace and have fun with the Daniel is the real bully trope, all of that, they couldn't just sit there and milk that. So season 1 was fresh and new, but then what season 3 did was start going with some deep cuts, and I'm talking about Chosen going back to Okinawa, maybe Chosen in Kumiko.
Chicago, the band, not the place. Chicago, the song, from
it was Peter Cetera, not Chicago. Do you hear any horns in that song?
Yeah.
But it was great.
Karate Kid was never my jam. It was The Last Dragon.
Really?
Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon.
Guys, why are we talking to each other right now?
You invited us.
I know, I did.
Under the pretense that
I knew you guys.
Yeah, it was under the pretense that I was going to watch the show.
Anyway, back to the deep cuts. Peter Cetera, then, Close enough. He was a part of Chicago. You got one building.
Did they play that?
There was a flashback, right?
We're talking about I Am a Knight. I'm a
passed
man who will
out.
fight for your honor. That song.
Yes,
Power
that's
of
it.
Love.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Wait, wasn't there also like a Power of Love that Huey Lewis did for Back to the Future?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
That's
different
confusing.
and better. Yeah.
That's super confusing. You know what I hate? Speaking of things that have nothing to do with this show, either these go to 11 or Cobra Kai. Peter Cetera, Amy Grant duet. Remember that one? The Next Time I Fall in Love.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's awful. Dude, remember how originally, when I first started listening to These Go to 11, when it was just Greg and Nathan, and sometimes you, Nathan, but usually just Greg and Nathan, it said, like, Christian issues with an ADD flair. I feel like I'm bringing you guys back to your roots right now in a real way.
Well, now it's just the ADHD flair. Oh,
Right, no,
Genesis, everything else. It's called These Go to Squirrel.
All right, let me bring it back around. You two gentlemen
Chosen,
are the current hosts of These Go to 11.
in theory.
I'm going to name myself now because Greg Dutcher's not here to claim it. Host emeritus.
yeah.
Are there any objections?
No. All in favor, say aye.
If he popped in at this moment, that would be beautiful.
He's still sending excuses, so I don't think. So.
Well, when I got the excuse, I was like, that means he's going to do it. Like he wanted us to not be expecting him.
We've thought that many times, but nope. That's not what happens.
Right. You it's like that scene in Arrested Development when they keep showing Job waiting for his dad to take him fishing. And he's always got all these different things. Greg, are we going to go podcasting? Listen, I got to help this guy find his puppy. But we're going to talk about Cobra Kai and sanctification. Here's the thesis of the show that you haven't listened to. Because you're bots. And you're bad friends. All right. It's that in our mortification, in our putting to death our sin nature, most Christians, most evangelicals today are Daniel LaRusso's. Defense only, looking for the magic pill, show me the drum. Show me that move. Show me the crane technique. I'll just do that sometimes. If hard temptation comes their way, they basically respond the way Daniel does when Karate's bad boy Mike Barnes shows up at his house in Karate Kid 3, which is just to kind of go limp and whine and threaten to call the police, or how Daniel responds when Johnny shows up in Cobra Kai, where he's like, I'm going to call the police. No, I'm going to feed you breakfast. Also, can I give you a free car? And instead of being like Daniel LaRusso, we need to be like Johnny Lawrence, which is to strike first, strike hard, and show no mercy and make no provision to the appetites of the flesh, and just curb stomp our sin nature. And I think the longer the miniseries went, maybe the more I was reaching. But then when I got to season 2 and I kind of rebooted it just for that one episode, I think it went really, really close to the biblical stuff because Kreese snakes his way in and compromises one compromise at a time with Johnny until he's got him right where he wants him. And he manipulates him, and it's all like, well, okay, you'll be here as an observer only, but I'm still in charge. Okay, you can use, the dojo's still mine, and slowly gets pushed out of being in control. And all of that, I think, is ready-made as a pastor. I think it's ready-made sermon illustration material, but only for people who've seen Cobra Kai. So only for like half the Nathans in the room right now. I want to know, Nathan Bell, to include you a little bit in your
a
own
little
podcast. In the podcast of which you have been the only common denominator for the last 5.5 to 6 years. Actually, just give a little background. Give us. I've never heard this. What's all the black belts and all the training and all the years and all the stuff that you've got under your belt, martial arts wise?
Yeah. So unofficially, I have been training in some form of defense since I was 3. So that is 36 years now.
Wow.
In official dojo training with an actual sensei, it's been 30 years. So I had a period of time where my father, when he was in the military, of course, they get some type of defensive training. Before I was born, he was stationed in Korea and took Taekwondo, actually in Korea, the birthplace of Taekwondo. He wrestled in high school for
foot fist art.
That's right. He wrestled in high school for, he was all state in Michigan. If you know anything about Michigan wrestling, that's huge. And so, when I came along, I was the child out of the 4 that showed the most interest in that type of a thing. And so, he kind of did what he could with me for, several years when I was younger. And then when I was 8, I really wanted to train seriously. And so I started training in Shaolin Kempo. And Shaolin Kempo is a mix of Northern style Chinese Kung Fu, American Kempo, and Jiu-Jitsu. Not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And so I got my black belt in that style. During that time, trained in capoeira, trained in combat hapkido, and then after I got out of college and kind of settled here in Maryland, I actually got involved with a Taekwondo dojo. Got my black belt in Taekwondo. And during that time, also trained in some various other styles. When I had E living with us, he wanted to do something. He wanted to do something with me. Initially, he wanted me to teach him martial arts, and I told him that that probably wasn't the best idea. Having your son and be your student doesn't always work out so well, but I told him if he wanted to do something, I would do it with him. So we ended up getting involved in Kali, Filipino stick fighting and knife fighting. And so I have 2 black belts, one in Shaolin Kempo, one in Taekwondo, and then I have 3 intermediate ranks in combat hapkido, capoeira, and Kali. So that is my background and experience in the martial arts.
In which of these are you a purple belt?
Callback.
That's a deep cut. That's a deep cut to when I was a host of These Go to 11. But actually, Nocha, when you were a child, and then me hearing that story.
That's right.
And never letting it go.
And never letting it go.
Now, first of all, I want to tell you that the proper way to deal with your son, you've seen season 1, so you should have your sworn enemy train your son in martial arts. That's the best way to do it.
That's right.
But with all that training, if you were to put your morals aside for a moment, and I realize it's easier for, say, Greg Dutcher than for guys like us, but if you were to try to do that, like forget the ethics of the whole thing.
Yeah.
Do you think there would be some truth to the Johnny Lawrence claim that the best defense is just more offense?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, because I know that even in growing up, I had been in martial arts since I was very young. And when I became a teenager, the style I studied at Shaolin Kempo was actually a very combative style. It was a harder style. Kempo was actually invented. Ed Parker modernized the style, and it became a specifically combative style where basically he would train his students in things. And in Hawaii, they would kind of go out and get into these street fights and come back and tell him what worked and what didn't. And so the style was built around actual fights. So it was a very combative style. And I remember new students would come in. Martial arts was kind of toward the end of its heyday at that point. But you would still get the occasional teenager. The parents would want their kids to learn discipline. And you would get those punk children who would come in, and that was kind of their thought and philosophy. Thankfully, I had a great teacher who basically told the child and the parent, I'm not teaching your kid how to beat people up. So if this is what they're looking for, then they need to go somewhere else because this isn't for them. But there is, particularly in those styles, there is that mentality, and can be that mentality of, strike hard, strike fast, no mercy. And I can definitely see, even in my years, like I could see my best friend and I grew up taking martial arts together, can see like the areas where we were treading that line of like, hey, I want to know if what I can do actually works. And so how can we passive aggressively get into a fight to make sure it doesn't look like we were at fault here? Thankfully, and I mean this in all honesty, thankfully, God is smarter than we were and in more control of us than we were, and allowed us to not get into those situations. So I never was in a situation, particularly at that time in my life, where I would have been aggressive with the style that I was taught.
Okay. I've always thought that there was something. I mean, it makes sense if you're going to be a good person, particularly if you're going to be a Christian, that you learn these things to defend weaker people. I mean, I firmly believe in not just war principle, but historic Christian teaching that you don't have to turn infinite other cheeks if someone is trying to attack someone else. You put yourself between the weaker person and the stronger person, and you might have to be a little bit more Joab, a little more Peter with the sword in the garden, than St. Francis. But I've always thought that if you were going to be 100% about martial arts as, in its purest form, it seems like something that wouldn't demand the defense, the rule of this can only be used in defense. It could be more effective. And again, I'm not the issue with that I think the potential downfall of the podcast is someone's going to hear it out of context and not recognize that I'm just talking about a spiritual battle.
Isn't that always our problem, though? Somebody hearing our podcast out of context?
Trying to incite karate riots.
If
all-out karate riots. That's the line.
Frenzy. A
karate frenzy. Yeah.
Let me ask you one more question since you know this stuff.
Yeah.
In season one, one of my favorite lines is, what was that? He goes, Taekwondo or Jiu-Jitsu or MMA or something? Mm-hmm. And Johnny says, no, it was karate, old school karate, which is what we see Kreese teaching in the dojo in The Karate Kid, the original movie, 1984, jab punch, front kick, roundhouse, just like drilling those basics to muscle memory and a few fancier moves for these guys who are black belts. But, it wasn't like there's a guy named Vidal who was an actual martial artist who's in Karate Kid, and he's just spinning all the time. He's like never not spinning. It looks cool,
right?
But he doesn't even he gets taken out at the very beginning of the semifinals by a regular punch. Like he's so spinning and he gets dizzy and he gets punched in the face. And so when that's the premise, and then you start watching further, I don't know how far you got, but it seems like they realized what American audiences wanted to see. is a lot of people like jumping up on someone's shoulders and wrapping their legs around him and then somersaulting. And I'm like, where did all this stuff come from? What styles are they mixing in there? Just out of curiosity.
So there is a style that came out. Actually, it was invented by some guys that I was in the tournament circuit with back in the mid-'90s called XMA, Extreme Martial Arts. And so it's a mixture of a bunch of different styles. So you have capoeira mixed in there, that dancing, gymnastics-y style, that gets thrown in there. You have different concepts of Kali and Aikido in there, where it's movement redirection, and so very quick hand strike movement strikes that get put in there. What we saw Johnny do in the original Karate Kid is closer to what we know as traditional karate martial arts. That again, the American audiences wanted to see something cool. So, you've got Jackie Chan that comes over in his very first American release movie, Rumble in the Bronx, where all of a sudden martial arts is cool and flashy and, and that's what people wanted to see more of. And so you've got this period where you had some legit martial artists, including actually Taylor Lautner, who played
the Wolf guy.
Yeah. He's a legit martial artist, and I actually saw him compete. Of course, I was older than him, but I saw him compete as a young kid in some of the tournaments in the New England area. And so, like, you had a lot of that stuff going. You have Mike Chat. You had I'm trying to think of some of the other guys, but they kind of came together and worked on this XMA style, which was, how can we kind of combine the flashy moves with some legitimate martial arts that we've all grown up with and learned. And so that's really what you're seeing in some cases is this blended style of the XMA. But they've also introduced some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu stuff that comes into play. So it took the basic form of the traditional karate that my sensei taught me and really kind of broadened it into more modern-day karate.
I don't think Johnny would know that, and I don't think he would like it, right? I think there's a little disconnect there, but I'm glad they did it because it made for a really cool fight choreography.
Right.
There was some really cool sequences. And there was also, like, the suspension of disbelief with, like, Tori, the bad girl character, had like, a few kickboxing lessons.
Yeah.
And yet she does, the really kind of stereotypical, like, Black Widow takedown where she, like, drops the guy, then she pulls his arm back, in the wrong direction until he taps out. And I'm like, you don't learn that if you freaking kickboxing. That's not kickboxing at all.
Yeah, and that's really what they're doing. Yeah, I mean, and that's what it boils down to is the stuff that actually, if you can actually go back onto YouTube and you can look at more traditional martial art tournaments, sparring tournaments, like from the 70s and 80s stuff with stuff that has like Chuck Norris in it and Bill Superfoot Wallace, Benny Uridex, like some of these guys who back in the day, like these were the guys that I would watch in movies. Cynthia Rothrock, these were the martial
Jeff
artists
Wincott.
that I grew up with and watched. And, then again, you had kind of this revolution that came through. And so as a martial artist, I would watch Jackie Chan. Of course, I had been in martial arts for a while, but then I see Jackie Chan come on the scene, and I'm like, oh man, that looks really cool. I don't know how practical any of that stuff would be. Clearly not, because when you look at the outtakes, it doesn't really work, but it looks really cool. And so again, these guys in the mid to late 90s started developing this XMA program, which is a combination of the older stuff that people were doing and trained in, and then a blend of the newer, flashier stuff that people really wanted to see.
See, that is exactly what I was curious about. Interesting. I think that also Kreese seems to be, this guy who learned. They give a little background. Do you remember what art he was learning from that guy in Vietnam, Nathan Bartleblaw?
No, what was
season 3? I don't remember, but he didn't learn much of it. But he was learning what they learned, what the Viet Cong guys knew.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they kind of highlight it kind of quickly. Like, it's clear they're trying to add some backstory to him a little bit, but I don't know if it's really fully developed. I could have used a little bit more of that, honestly. Like, I think.
Oh, hey, by the way, you see my sweatshirt? Hold the Pass.
Yes.
This is a movie that I helped make. I didn't help a lot, but I was there the whole time, and I was right by Cliff Graham, the director's side, the whole time, and it was very cool. It's about Shamgar, and there was a guy
I remember
there.
The stuff on you had pictures and stuff online, I think, at one point.
Yeah. So there was a guy who played the general of the army that was coming through, the Canaanites who were coming through to kill and rape and murder and destroy, that Shamgar is going to fight the Philistines. Not Canaanites, Philistines. I know my Bible. That guy and I sat down. Cliff goes, listen, we need to fill this plot hole. It's got to be quick. It's got to be punchy. I need you two guys to go write a scene. I go write a scene with this guy. And then I'm watching season 3 of Cobra Kai, and they show the diner scene where you think the one guy's Kreese, and it turns out that the guy with the Goldie Wilson wannabe with the mop is actually him. And the army recruiter comes walking through and talking to everybody. And I'm like, holy cow, I know that guy. I wrote a scene of Hold the Pass with him.
That's the guy. That's the guy. That's pretty cool. That's pretty neat.
Nice.
He said that it was one of the most fun couple of days of years and years in this industry is being part of that. But Nathan, Nathan Bartlebaugh, how do you guys do this? I guess when one of you says Nathan, the other one knows that's who you're talking about.
We assume unless one of us has lost our
I'm going to call you Bart
mind.
and Bell. So Bart, 2 questions for you, and the second one will segue us into something spiritual. Now, Hans, Booby, since this is radio, not television, I'm going to describe Nathan Bell for the listener. I'm going to say he's about, 6'3", maybe? What's your actual height?
I'm 5'10".
Oh, he's like a stocky. Okay, I've never stood in the same room with you, man. I've only seen you on. Okay, so what are you weighing in at now?
Not very good. I'm 270 right now.
This guy's like, he's all shoulders and like he's just big. This is a big, strong dude. This is a guy who wouldn't need to know karate in order for people to not mess with him. So my question for Bartlebaugh is, if for whatever reason you and Nathan Bell were to get into a fight, how long do you think the fight would last, and how would it go?
See, I don't want to say that I would just shoot him on air.
How do I say it without saying it?
He's pulling the Indiana Jones out, baby.
You just pick up a brick.
Indiana Jones right there, baby.
That's right.
No, you guys are in
I
like
would
a
find some sort of way to incapacitate Nathan. I would probably throw a brownie over his shoulder or something, and then hit him with a 2x4.
What I'm hearing is both that you would use your superior intellect and his like slovenly lack of discipline or something to. Okay.
What are you doing here? You're creasing us. You're trying to divide us here.
So you're Eagle Fang.
I was going to say, you
Nathan
can't
Bell,
rupture Eagle Fang. Eagle Fang. That was the best part of the entire thing so far.
But eagles don't have fangs, and he just wings the T-shirt at his face. I need some of the back of my car is like there's like 1 inch of paint left. It's all stickers, and I'm like, well, that inch needs to be covered with an Eagle Fang sticker.
And that logo with the eagle with the actual fangs, that is so represents what it was like to walk around in a mall in like 1987, right? When everybody,
which is right where that's where Johnny Lawrence still lives.
Yeah,
he lives in 1987.
Right. Well, so I have a question about this. So this idea that I guess the podcast is based around is that Johnny Lawrence's perspective is the right one.
Yes.
And Danny's is the wrong one.
Right.
Okay.
No. From if we're looking at this from a human point of view,
from a spiritual standpoint, they have the right perspective.
Our jihad, if you will, against sin. I just said that to be controversial.
Right.
In our battle against sin, if I were to say which of these guys has his life together more, I think I'd say Daniel.
Yeah, although as we see the show going on, I guess that's why like season 3 kind of it doesn't put like you pointed out, they can't kind of keep playing season one over and over, right? Like they just can't keep that dynamic.
Yeah.
So of course you have to kind of push them together, and some of that doesn't feel organic, and some of it feels kind of clunky. I do feel as they move towards the later bits of the season, when they both start to figure out that there are problems with not necessarily with the ethos of what they were learning, but that both of their mentors had issues, and that they have sort of adapted those issues. And I guess the question is, as we move towards season 3 and the whole concept of the Eagle Fang and where Johnny and Daniel end up, and I agree. I think one of the things is, personally, Zabka's just more likable.
Yes.
You know, I think he was like, even in the original Karate Kid, even when he was beating poor Daniel up all the time, he was not so much in that movie, but in this, particularly this series, he's the underdog to start with, but he just has a more likable presence, I think. I'm sure in real life, you know, Ralph Macchio is a perfectly nice guy, but I think even acting wise, Zabka's just a little bit more affable. If that makes sense.
Well,
like in the show, Daniel
LaRusso has a sneer about him all the time. He thinks he's better than everyone. When he's the poor kid in Reseda, he thinks he's better than those snobs at the Encino Oaks country club. And then when he's the rich guy in the country club, he thinks he's better than this dirtbag in Reseda. And it's hard to get on board with that guy.
And that's, right? I think why I don't think Karate Kid connected to me as a kid as much, because of that element of like, Daniel's kind of a jerk too, you know, like given, you know, you appreciate what Miyagi's trying to do for him, and you're kind of happy, I guess, to see him win at the end, but there's still a feeling under the thing of like, does he really deserve this either? Where is he going to go? So I think the Cobra Kai aspect of exploring how those two guys are both in their own way still stuck. The failure to launch, in a certain sense, you know, they are exactly like you said. They're both kind of stuck in the 80s to some degree. Now, yes, Daniel is technically more successful, but there is a sensibility where Johnny's eyes are maybe, you know, he's becoming less of a jerk as time goes on.
Right.
But I guess the question is that idea that kick it in the face, strike first, sweep the leg kind of deal. When this, and it's, isn't it weird? Like season 3 opens and you've got Miguel in a coma. Which is like, but he's like in a fight where he can't connect with his feet or fists or anything, and it's like, what is this, like the Flash? Is he in the Beat Force? Like, what's going on right now? He's in some sort of mental space where he can't do anything, and I guess that's the representation of the coma. When he gets out of it, you know, Johnny's trying to do the right thing in the wrong way. So he throws his phone across the room, and you've got that moment. And I'm waiting to roll my eyes because it's like, get up there and get it yourself. And you see him pick his beaten, thrown over a railing carcass up and drag himself to get the phone. But he falls flat on his face. Bam. Lands.
There's a lot of those moments where the music swells.
Johnny's like, yeah. And I was like ready to roll my eyes. And I think that's why Cobra Kai works, is it knows in this moment that here's the problem. Here's the Johnny Lawrence problem. Is like the pull yourself up and do this sometimes ends up with him landing on the face. And what does the next thing Johnny does? He doesn't go over and help him. He goes, nurse, get in here. Fix this. But he just sort of walks away.
And Nathan Bell, spoilers. But he keeps on trying different variations of the same thing, which is just do it. Pull yourself back up every time you fall, even though you don't have legs that work, and just do it. And eventually it works. That was what I loved about it. Eventually, the dumbest thing, going to see the Twisted Sister guy in concert, and now he's tapping his foot, and now he's like hoisting him. I mean, like eventually, the kick it in the face thing does pay dividends, and I think in real life that's often the case. Whether you're starting a business or whatever you're doing, like if you're the guy who's gonna try and zen your way into it, you're probably not gonna make it. If you're the guy who's like, yeah, I'll fall down on my face and drag myself back up so many times because I want this so bad. And the question is, to segue it to the spiritual, is being holy in our comport, or is the King James would say in our conversation, meaning in how we live, is it something we want that bad, or do we just fall down and go, I can't do it, and then sit there and go, oh, well, I'm saved. So, and I think that's what season 3 did well.
Come from that. And I think the first season, of course, is there's the black and white of, you know, the good versus the bad. And it's always, well, in the first movie, Daniel LaRusso supposed to represent good, you know, and Johnny's bad and that sort of thing. And then season 1, it kind of goes the other way. But I think the issue is viewing and to say Daniel's view, I would say maybe more like Miyagi's view, and of course Miyagi's thing was balance. And I think that Nathan would concur that martial arts, I a couple of years of it years ago as a kid, but like in general, just understanding or knowing about it, that balance is a basic aspect of it all the way through, that anyone that comes in with that attitude of kick it in the face can be effective to a degree, but I do think there's got to be the balance, because the other part of Miyagi was not that violence is always the answer, but you understand this so that you can maybe avoid the violence. So if you're looking at it in the spiritual comport aspect of it, is there a way that we do the balance? And that seems to where the show is moving Johnny a little bit towards Daniel and Daniel towards Johnny. And I guess the other thing is they're becoming their own people without being completely fealty to what they grew up under. But in the spiritual aspect, I guess the question becomes, what do we do with that viewpoint, the kind of Miyagi that you're teaching this discipline, that the defense aspect isn't necessarily, oh, I don't want to be part of a fight, but how do I do this so I don't have to have the fight? And I guess the putting the mortification and the putting sin to death, are there things in your perspective that a Christian can do so that this fight, this kick it in the face, also becomes, how do I put myself in a place where I don't have to be that aggressive not aggressive with sin, but I think we all probably know people who find themselves, they aren't doing enough protective defense of their own hearts and minds. Right. And they find themselves in a karate frenzy every single time with sin. And typically speaking, you are more likely to get thrown over the rails. And, so I think, is there a point where defensive is being that defensive doesn't mean weak, but defensive, I think sometimes is putting the armor on and knowing how to, to protect certain areas. You're not always going to be perfect. And then when you are in that defensive place, I think you are in a place where if you need to go to offensive, and sometimes, like you pointed out earlier, to defend others, because I think that's a lot of times, as the Christian, if you are defending yourself against these things. So I think it is a balance. I definitely think that this idea of we want to be very hands-off. We don't want to talk in aggressive terms about mortification, except Scripture talks about it in aggressive terms. So, there's that. And so I agree. I do think there's the balance there, or the striking the balance. And that seems to be where Cobra Kai is going, not spiritually, but in the show in general.
Yeah, I would say screw balance from a point of view of the spiritual battle. But when you talk about, like, if you're having to struggle, like the life or death battle where it's all up in the air and who's going to win every day, maybe we're praying, lead me not into temptation, and then we're going into the bathroom where Johnny's dressed like a skeleton rolling a joint, which, as Gary Goldman points out, is the most frightening image possible in the 1980s, and we're dousing it with water. You know what I mean? Like you're continually like putting yourself in a stupid position where you're going to get defeated. And like I mentioned I don't know if you guys are familiar with John Piper's Anthem acronym. It's I think he gives it in terms of defeating lust, but it's great for, basically any kind of, and really there's a lot of different kinds of lust, not just sexual lust. But I emphasized in one episode of the podcast you've never heard, the N in Anthem, which is just the word no. Like you forcefully, within seconds of a thought and a temptation entering your mind, you beat it down and end it, because the longer you negotiate and the longer you try to leave boy alone to train, the more likely you're going to get beaten up by five guys dressed as skeletons. Whereas the A, the first letter in Anthem, is for avoid. And I mean, that's just not what my Cobra Kai podcast is about. But if you're going to zoom out and look at, another thing is I mentioned my son, who you just saw come in a minute ago and say goodnight to me. Sweet kid. He's actually deadly as can be. 2nd degree black belt in a system of martial arts. And when they were teaching him, he started at 5 years old, and they were teaching them, here are your rules of self-defense. Shout for help if somebody attacks you. Try to run away. And if those two things don't work, use your self-defense. And I said, don't do that. That's awful. And then I said, well, I mean, obviously we can all see how that would be maybe a biblical illustration, in that God always provides that way out. So if there is the way out, take it, right? So if you see how you can avoid the battle to begin with, you'd almost be stupid. I think there's a confidence in the flesh that comes from being a little more of a mature believer. Like you've had a lot of successes, you've made some progress in your sanctification, and you start thinking, I can handle anything. Yeah, turn on that movie with tons of skin. I'm not going to sin. Or I'll go hang out with these guys that always bring out the worst in me from, before I was saved. No big deal. And I think you're right. You have to remember, even in my sanctification, I'm not some, completely, what's the word for can't be defeated the simple word I can't think of?
John Kreese.
Indestructible, bulletproof. John Kreese.
There's a better word. What the world's the word I can't think of? Whatever. Indestructible. You're not a killing machine.
Yeah.
That you are very fallible, and you're gullible.
Yes.
Just not it either. I don't know what it is, but it's on the tip of my tongue.
Good grief.
Yeah, and I'm not going to be able to think of anything else.
Unbleedable.
Everybody just tweet this. Tweet what the word is. I definitely see where you're coming from. That there is an element of putting on the armor of God, so that the more time you spend in the presence of Christ and near Him, like there was a great moment in season 3 where Johnny's just about had it. He got clocked on the back of the head with a sai, which was amazing. But the butt of it, he got like pistol whipped with a sai, and he's just out for the count. And it's the moment in one of the Karate Kid movies where Daniel's getting beat up, and Miyagi would come in and just destroy everybody in only the way that Pat Morita can, because he was a genius. And in Karate Kid, or in Cobra Kai season 3, it's Daniel who comes in at that moment. And he does the awesome Miyagi style moves, and he rescues Johnny. And if Daniel had just always stuck by Miyagi's side, those moments would never have needed to happen. And I think in a sense, if we always just stay as close as possible to Christ and don't go, thinking I can go off into my life and compartmentalize and walk away from the spiritual quote unquote part of life and just, that's for Sunday or that's for first thing in the morning, and stay close to Christ all the time, there's going to be a lot less worry about having, am I going to win the fights, because they're going to be fewer. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that has anything to do with what you were saying, but I kind of feel like it does.
One of the things that
go back to explain screw balance a little more for them.
I think that there is, and I mentioned this in an ep of the podcast, there's a sense within Christianity of people who don't know the Bible well, who say like all things in moderation. The real goal here is just not go overboard with anything. And that's the goal. And it gets kind of conflated with a sort of yin and yang, and it becomes this kind of nebulous pan-religious idea of, I can do certain things that might be considered sinful as long as they don't go all the way into it. I just kind of have to find a certain balance. And
that live in the gray, which I'm not a fan of. I'm talking more the balance between, like, trying to use the Cobra Kai metaphor there. The balance between, as you see it, offense and defense. That's kind of what I'm saying.
Sure.
I see there should be a balance of that. I don't agree with the idea of, I don't see balance is not living in the middle. I had somebody once tell me many years ago, like, oh, you just have to live in the gray. And then they proceeded to tell me all the issues they were having. And I said, living in the gray doesn't mean what you think it means. And it seems like you're having a lot of issues because of it.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said that in Ephesians 5, you've got the armor of God is a helmet, a breastplate, greaves. You've got a shield. You've got only one thing is offensive, and that is the sort of the spirit. So yeah, we certainly want to.
So that's when
I
mean balance. That's balance.
Yeah, no, you're right. You are correct.
Well, and I think too, I think honestly, you guys
you were worried if I thought you were correct or not. Nathan Belsman wanted to say something for like 45 minutes. Speak.
Well, so one of the things that I think you guys are you're kind of dancing around. One of the things that I remember my instructor saying to me when I first started fighting was this idea of I was very much always on the defensive. And when you're unsure of yourself, you are. And I think there's something to take away from that as a believer, is that as a young believer, not really knowing and understanding, getting that training and doctrine, you are on that defensive. Now, what that looks like can go about in very different ways, but as you become more and more experienced, you learn that your defensive fighting even becomes offensive fighting. And so understanding that with sin, we are constantly in a fight. And so there are times where I need to take the defensive with it, where I run and flee, right? That's what Joseph does when he's confronted with Potiphar's wife.
Right.
He's not standing his ground and fighting that. No, he's getting out of there, and having nothing to do with it. And so to me, like, okay, that's a defensive posture he's taking in that environment. The more offensive posture would be like Daniel standing up to Nebuchadnezzar, or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego standing up to Nebuchadnezzar. O king, it doesn't matter what you do to us, we're not going to bow down before the idols. So there are times where in our life, like being in the fight of sin, it's a constant. It is never ending. And so understanding when you take the defense and turn it into the offense, you're looking for that moment to strike. And so Joseph's moment where he's running and fleeing from sin, it's an offensive action, but it's also defensive. And it's the same thing with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. What they're doing in their confrontation of the sin is it's an offensive action, but it's also defensive. And so understanding that balance and that difference of no, all offense is defense and all defense is offense, and having that understanding of how those two relate and coincide with one another as a fighter gives you that balance, gives you that perspective of training and understanding, of knowing this is a fight that I can stay and fight, versus no, I've got to get out of here because this is something that I can't even be around because I know that this is going to get me in trouble. And so I think that's where that balance comes in.
You keep doing this with your hands, and I keep waiting for you to say this is one of the tenets of karate. No? Nobody? Okay. Which, by the way, the tenets of karate that I learned were courtesy, humility, integrity, indomitable spirit, perseverance, and self-control, several of which are fruits of the spirit as well. Mm-hmm. I still remember those all these years later. And the what was it? The tenets and what was the other one that was like speed, mass, equilibrium, reaction force? Anyway.
Is that physics?
The invincible was the word I was looking for earlier, by the way, guys. It was invincible, like the Black Knight. No, what you're saying, it makes perfect sense to me in that, yes, you flee. I mean, we're told to flee a number of times in the Bible, in the New Testament. Yeah. Flee fornication, flee youthful lusts, flee the love of money, all these things that we should flee from. But even when you flee, you're not running away from the enemy. You're running to the cross.
Yeah.
And in doing that, it is like you say, it's an offensive. It's a snuffing out of the sin. I think that the way I was saying when I said screw balance, I didn't mean the kind of balance that Nathan was talking about, which I agree is good. I meant like if for example Joseph had said, "Listen, I'm not going to come to bed with you, Potiphar's wife, but how about a foot massage?" Right. Or let's just we'll get really kind of. We'll toe that line of intimacy, but I'm not going to go all the way to like really doing the thing that we call adultery. And this way I'll have deniability. And instead he's like, no, I will have nothing to do with this. Damn the consequences. Yeah. I know I'll probably wind up in jail, but I'm not going to have anything to do with this. So it was a snuffing out of the temptation by removing himself from the situation.
Yeah.
And maybe, and I think part of that too is often, that withdraw the strategic retreat in order to regroup and continue to fight.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's where, again, that understanding of what a fight actually looks like, learning that all your defensive movements are offensive movements and all your offensive movements are defensive movements. And so learning, that strategy of, I mean, if we're going to, keep kind of going down this road with it of, again, we look at Joseph, like you said, Zach, that defense, that running is running to the cross, running to Christ, who is the ultimate vindicator of, the wrongs. And so this is what's right, and this is what I'm going to do. And so, there's that movement and that action that's going on there. And it's subtle because, again, a solid defense is going to involve offensive strategy and offensive attack. And so they're very subtle when you're fighting on what they look like and how it's interwoven together and how it acts. And so I think as believers, that same thing is true. My defensive strategy is going to look offensive or look like an offense. And so
it's going to look offensive.
It's going to look offensive. Hey, and to some people it will look offensive too. I mean, Potiphar's wife couldn't have been feeling very good after that happened. And so, but it's going to include a good offense, and it will be involved in that fight, and you'll see how it works and how it coordinates. And ultimately what's going to be produced is the victory. I mean, ultimately that's what's going to be produced is the victory. When I go through, or when I went through, I haven't done any tournaments in a while now, but when I was doing tournaments, it was never a matter of, did I do my best? Win or lose, I was going to throw everything out there. And if I lost, it had nothing to do with judges. It had nothing to do with the points. It had to do with me. I'm the one that lost this fight. I lost this battle. And so there was a clear victor and a clear loser. And so in the case of, battling against this sin, it's, when I fail, I can look to the moments and I can say, this is where I lost it. This is where my guard dropped. This is where I stopped putting up the fight I needed to in order to overcome in this moment. I mean, we can trace that to David, right? David not out on the battlefield with his troops like he should have been, back in his palace, standing up over, observing his land, watching, Bathsheba bathing naked. I mean, you trace the moments to the loss, go and you trace them backwards, and you're like, this is where my defense lost its potency. This is where my offense lost its potency. And I lost this war. I lost this victory. I lost this battle.
And it's another example, I think, too, where the way he could have snuffed out. I mean, this guy killed a giant. This guy, David, has killed his tens of thousands, the song goes.
Yeah.
That people sung about him. And the way that he could have won that victory would have been to go back down into his palace and said, what am I doing? Right? Like, it would have looked like a retreat. Mm-hmm. But instead, we're told that he looks and he sees that Bathsheba is beautiful, which, I mean, it's not his fault, perhaps. I don't know. I was actually stood where David's palace was when I was in Israel, and Cliff, Cliff Graham, who was doing the whole thing, says he had to have known this, because you see where the mighty men's little homes are, and they're very small. They're almost like little appendages to his palace. But say he didn't recognize what he was going to see. It's not your fault when you see that there's a naked woman there and she's pretty. But then we see that he saw that she was very beautiful, which means he's doing the old guy squint, and like having, and then he says, bring her to me. And it's this, it's this progression,
right?
Which I'm going to talk about in probably what's the last episode of my podcast. What happens with hidden sin is you slowly bring it into yourself, and then it just changes into shame. Had he just, stomped the head of that snake immediately and gone back, gotten himself out of that situation, it would have looked, I think, from a human point of view, like a retreat. But from a spiritual perspective, it would have been very much an offense move. It would have been like, here's this enemy, this sin that's crouching by my door, as God says to Cain, and I must master it or it will master me. And the way I can master it in this moment is just, I'm going to go do something productive. Why don't I go write another psalm? Been a while since I wrote a psalm, right? I mean,
This is going to write a really long psalm.
Yeah, instead he's going to write Psalm 51 about how hard he fell and all the consequences. We're getting along here. I have a question for Nathan Bartleby about season 3, and it is this: were you excited by the epilogue in which the phone was picked up and the number of undoubtedly one Terry Silver was called, or did that mean nothing to you because you're not much of a Cobra or much of a Karate Kid fan?
No, well, Terry Silver, Thomas Ian Griffith, right?
Yes. So you watched Karate Kid 3.
Yeah. I've seen them all.
You've seen every movie. You're Nathan Bartleby.
Yeah, I didn't see the next Karate Kid. I remember when it came out, but I didn't see that one.
There's Zen bowling in that one.
Is it good?
No. It's possibly even worse than Karate Kid 3, which is hard to imagine.
It was pretty bad. But I do like Thomas Ian Griffith. I'm sure Nathan would concur. But I'd like to see him come back because they brought Martin Cove back, right? Or Martin, is that right?
Martin Cove was great too. He got better as an actor. He's awesome. He's so grizzled. He looks so cool.
He's in a movie right now called VFW. Have you seen it? Sort of an horror action movie. It's like William Sadler and him and the guy from who played the villain in Avatar, Stephen Lang.
Oh yeah.
And they're a bunch of grizzled vets who are in their local VFW, and suddenly these people run in and they're being attacked, and it becomes a siege movie where these drugged up freaks are trying to break in, and these old guys are having to take them out. So it's it's pretty entertaining.
Is that something I can see on Prime right now, or what?
Is it? It's on one of the streaming. I don't know. It is on. It's available. I don't know if it's on Prime yet, but I'm sure it will be. I saw it somewhere, but it might have been on
VFW.
There's a horror streaming service called Shudder. I know it was there, but it may be on Prime now. And
what do you guys know Thomas Ian Griffith from, if not just from Karate Kid 3?
He had a couple of 90s martial arts movies. He was also the villain in a John Carpenter movie called Vampires from the late 90s. He was
I saw that. Vampire. I guess I didn't realize it was the same guy.
Yeah. I don't know if his skills were to full effect there, but he had a couple. Did you see any of them, Nathan? I think he had a couple martial arts films in the 90s, didn't he?
No, the only one that I remember him in is Vampires.
Okay.
Yeah.
It might be.
That was Wes Carpenter, right?
Yeah. You combined two, but it was John Carpenter.
John
Carpenter. Yeah, Wes Craven and John.
Yeah,
you know what? I'm doing what Rose McGowan did in Scream, when she's like, what Wes Carpenter movie is this from? Because we just went and saw Scream at the theater at Halloween. They had it when our theaters briefly opened back up. It was pretty cool.
Oh, nice. They had it at I couldn't take the kids obviously to that one, but they had it at the they can only see Scanners, but they had it at my kids are always like, play that part where he thought we watched Scanners. I was like, get out of here. But I need to go back and rewatch Scream because that was a good movie.
I think they did a good job to Cobra Kai season 3 in not bringing in too many people. They brought Allie in for just one episode.
Yes, they handled that well because they teased it at the end of 2, and I was like, this is going to become
bloated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they bring her in for the one ep, give it to her, and she becomes the Deus Ex Machina that, in my mind, believably caused both Johnny and Daniel to see the truth that they're very alike. And
they handled that very well. It did not feel sitcom-y. It was that's the thing. They're being so over the top with some of the stuff that they always have to come back and have a moment that resonates, that feels real, that's effective. Like you pointed out, like when a kid lands on his face, you have to him doing it gradually over time feels real. You don't want to see him just pop up and jump out of the bed.
And of course, we're dealing with people who 35 years ago were in their 20s playing people in their teens.
That's very true, right? Ralph Macchio was not a kid from the very beginning.
For some reason, somehow, even though both of them look like they're pushing 60, Elizabeth Shue still looks like, this is like Adventures in Babysitting 2, and it's like 2 years later.
Yeah.
Gosh, she's like, she hasn't had a ton of work done, and she looks just beautiful and fresh, and the whole like Allie with an eye, motivating everything, like sticking with these guys for decades. It held up. And
when I saw that, I was like, get Netflix, give her a show. Not her character, but give Elizabeth Shue a show.
Just don't let it be The Boys, which she was in, which was garbage.
The Boys. What?
That's the superhero one on Prime.
Oh, I watched an episode of that and stopped.
Garbage. Did you guys see Death Wish, the remake with Bruce Willis? She was in that briefly before she got murdered.
I didn't see that one. No, I didn't see it.
I highly recommend it. It's a dumb movie that is very fun.
Is it still because I caught about 10 minutes of a Bruce Willis movie on Netflix or something the other day, and I liked Bruce Willis, like the 90s, and even he's done a couple movies not that long ago, but whatever this was, he just did not care. If I didn't know what a Bruce Willis was, I'd assumed he was the director's dad.
What a Bruce Willis was. What was it? What was it about?
What was it? It's something on Netflix. The thing with Bruce Willis now is he's got as many movies on Netflix. My father-in-law was watching it. He got as many movies on Netflix as Nicolas Cage and like John Cusack have now. And he is cashing a paycheck. You turn any of those on, and they all have like one word. It's like extraction, addiction, cashing the paycheck. And like if you turn any of these on, you should just for a minute or two to see how little he does not care. He's sometimes not even looking at the camera, and it's not clearly a thing of he's trying.
You're not
to
supposed to look at the camera when you're acting. FYI.
Well, I mean, he's not even aware there is a camera. He's just looking at the guy holding his paycheck over the shoulder of the person. I mean, it's hard to explain what it's like. It is really like he just walked on set. Is probably more acting or more energy when he goes to the craft services table.
Jeez, wow. Yikes.
I mean, I'm serious. Like, if you guys, like, Nathan, when you're not watching Cobra Kai, turn on a Bruce Willis, one of these Bruce Willis movies on Netflix.
Well, just watch Die Hard 5.
It's so much worse than that.
Terrible.
I mean, I didn't care that much for that movie either, but it's way worse than that. I realize why he wasn't in that much of Glass now after like seeing some of the recent stuff.
Glass? Who cares about Glass? John McClane. That's a good Bruce Willis movie. Anyway, guys, I got a bolt. My wife and I paused a Bible study to come and do this.
Sorry we let you down. Now I feel bad.
Well, you know what? I'm to blame because I thought you might listen to my podcast. So
the instructions weren't clear.
I know. Anyway, hey, I'm keeping my footprint on These Go to 11. I don't want it to be forgotten. So
we will certainly not be forgetting you ever, Zach. You are always welcome.
In fact, Screw Balance is going to be part of our intro now for every episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to These Go to 11. Screw Balance.
It's got some fancy techno music in the background.
Or the power of love.
Or the power. That would be great. Yeah. Well, they have a little animated icon of Zach sliding down those lantern strings at the end of the
massive man boobs kind of popping with the Japanese lanterns. Hello, once again, I'm Nathan Bell, and I am a man who will fight for your honor. With me, as always, is Nathan Bartlebois.
How are you, Nathan? Nothing's going on.
I'm the podcast equivalent of Bruce Willis, just cashing the paycheck. Is what I am.
What am I here for? Jeez. Okay. Well, take care, Zach.
All right. I think that the Casbah has been rocked sufficiently. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time.
Thank you, Zach. We will definitely have this. Just time, no effort.
Thank you. It was literally the least you could do.
What's up, players? No, he's not. He's not really here.
That's not happening.
Oh, all right, guys. This was great. Gentlemen, we just rocked the Casbah.
These go to 11.